Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. In this particular video, let us discuss the advantages of internal control. So what are the main merits? We may even ask it as merits of internal control or importance of internal control. All are one and the same. First one is identification of defects. So as you all know that in the internal control, the work performed by one employee will automatically get checked by the another employee. So if the first employee, if they have done any omission or if they have done any faults, okay, so what happens is the another person who checks it may deduct that. So it easily, if any defect is there in the work, that will be automatically get identified. ಸೊ ಇಂಟರ್ನಲ್ ಕಂಟ್ರೋಲ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿ ಮಾಡುವಂತಹ ಕೆಲಸವನ್ನ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿ ಚೆಕ್ ಮಾಡೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಮೊದಲನೇ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಎರರ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ತಪ್ಪುಗಳು ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಈಸಿಯಾಗಿ ಎರಡನೇ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿ ಕಂಡುಹಿಡಿತಾರೆ. ಸೊ ಡಿಫೆಕ್ಟ್ ಗಳನ್ನ ಈಸಿಯಾಗಿ ಕಂಡುಹಿಡಿಬಹುದು. ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ ಇಸ್ ಫ್ಲೆಕ್ಸಿಬಿಲಿಟಿ. So what happens, year wise comparative analysis can be done. So last year what was the result and this year what was the result. So if any changes is there in the results, then you can easily get to know that why that change has happened. So if any changes is there for you to have in your internal control system, you can even do the certain changes in your internal control system in order to have the efficiency. So you can flexibly change your internal control system. You can adapt new changes, you can remove unwanted systems. So those can be done. ಸೊ ಹಿಂದಿನ ವರ್ಷ ಮತ್ತೆ ಈ ವರ್ಷಕ್ಕೆ ನೀವು ಕಂಪ್ಯಾರಿಟಿವ್ ಅನಾಲಿಸಿಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. ಏನಾದ್ರು ವ್ಯತ್ಯಾಸ ಆಯ್ತು ರಿಸಲ್ಟ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅಂದಾಗ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಒಂದು ಇಂಟರ್ನಲ್ ಕಂಟ್ರೋಲ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು ಚೇಂಜಸ್ ಗಳನ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಬಹುದು. ಸೊ ದಟ್ ಎಫಿಷಿಯನ್ಸಿ ಅಚೀವ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಆ ಒಂದು ಫ್ಲೆಕ್ಸಿಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಇದೆ, ನೀವು ಚೇಂಜ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಬಹುದು. ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್, ಟೈಮ್ ಸೇವಿಂಗ್. ಸೊ ವಾಟ್ ಹ್ಯಾಪನ್, so in this internal control system, okay, uh, it is it has a control over the operations in the organizational activity. So this needs not this makes the auditor to not prepare any audit programs, need not be prepared, or any audit engagement should not be prepared, because all this information you will get in the internal control system. So this eradication of audit programs and preparation of audit engagement can be done, so that it saves a greater time. So it saves a lot of time for you. ಸೊ ನೀವು ಇಂಟರ್ನಲ್ ಕಂಟ್ರೋಲ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕಂಟ್ರೋಲ್ ಮಾಡೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಆಡಿಟ್ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ ಮತ್ತೆ ಆಡಿಟ್ ಎಂಗೇಜ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡುವ ನೆಸೆಸಿಟಿ ಇರಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ನಿಮಗೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಟೈಮ್ ಉಳಿತಾಯ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್, ಲೆಸ್ಸರ್ ರಿಸ್ಕ್ ಆಫ್ omission. So what happens, as I told you that, so each and every uh, employee is allotted different kind of work. So what happens, none of the work will uh, be like it is not allocated to anyone, because each and every employee will be allocated the work. So you will easily get to know which work is not allocated or which work is pending. So omission of work will not be possible. Next, provision for training facility. So due to lack of adequate experience, okay, the auditor may face difficulty in establishing a close relationship with audit program. When there is no internal control system in an organization, the auditor may have we feel so much difficulty. Okay, so when the internal control system is there, even the auditor can provide his valuable insights in order to have a good control system of the organization. So this provision of training facility will also be there. There are certain limitations also of this internal control. First one is cost. So as they have to have a separate internal control department, okay, they should have this thing. What do you say? Like separate people hired for that internal control. So again, it will increase the cost for the organization. Next, transactions. So what happens? Uh, this internal control tends to be directed and anticipated type of transaction. So it will anticipate the types of transaction, and it may usually it doesn't focus on unusual transaction. So what are the transaction that have taken place in the organization? This will check only those transactions, and some of the unusual transactions may get neglected. So that is one of the limitations. Next, possibility of errors. It's a natural human tendency that we are tend to make certain errors due to our carelessness, due to our negligence or distractions, or while making any of the judgment, we may forget to record some transactions. So again, those errors are again the limitations for internal control. Next, circumstances. So sometimes what happen, there'll be a dispute or a conflict within the organization. Conflict may arise because one person's work will be get automatically checked by another person. So the person may feel it as a bossing authority, or he may feel like he's under the supervision of someone else. So that is where the conflict arises between the employees and between the outsiders. So that is also possible. Next, responsibility. So what happens when the person is held responsible for something? They may misuse their responsibility, they may misuse their power. For example, the member of a management may override a control. Suppose an employee has made a decision, management is higher authority to the employee. So whatever the decision has made by the employee, that may be suddenly changed by the management. The management may override the decision. So that is also possible. Next, conditions. So what happens? Uh, Suppose sudden condition changes. Okay, the plans whatever they made by the internal control system may not work that time. So again, that is also one of the factor, that is limitations of internal control. So this is about the merits and demerits, or advantages or disadvantages or limitations of internal control. Next, let us discuss the duties of auditor regarding internal control. What exactly the auditor should do in case of internal control? What and all he need to check? To assess the adequacy of accounting system as a basis for preparing the financial statement. So whatever the accounting system they are following in an organization, whether it is adequate, whether properly they are maintaining, proper ಆಗಿ accounting system ನ follow ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ organizationally, adequate ಆಗಿ follow ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ auditor ಚೆಕ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. So to identify the types of potential misstatements that could appear in the financial statement. ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸಾಕ್ಷನ್ ಮಿಸ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, possibilities, that has to be checked by the auditor. So auditor can have a raw guess that this particular transaction may be stated wrongly in the financial statements. So those type of misstatements, possible misstatements, should be identified by the auditor. So to consider the factors that affects the risk of misstatements. So ಈ ರೀತಿ ಮಿಸ್ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ತಪ್ಪಾಗಿ ರೆಕಾರ್ಡ್ ಮಾಡಿರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ರಿಸ್ಕ್ ಎದುರಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಕೂಡ, ಆ ರಿಸ್ಕಿನ ಅದೆಷ್ಟು ಎಫೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನ್ಗೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಕೂಡ ಆಡಿಟರ್ ಚೆಕ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್, based on this, you need to design the appropriate audit procedure. Keeping this in mind, you should have the proper audit procedure, like when to start, how to start, what are the books of accounts to be audited, how much time has to be spent on each books of account. All these things, even the scope of audit, can be designed by the auditor. The auditor should rely on the internal control only after ascertaining and evaluating these controls. So auditor should not blindly depend on the internal control. First, you need to check whether the internal control is really well enough. Really, are they efficiently working? It is properly maintained. Once he is satisfied that the properly internal controls are properly maintained, only then he should completely depend or rely on the internal control. ಇಂಟರ್ನಲ್ ಕಂಟ್ರೋಲ್ ಸರಿಯಾಗಿದೆಯಾ ಇಲ್ವಾ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಮೊದಲು ಆಡಿಟರ್ ಚೆಕ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಅದು ಸರಿ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಆಡಿಟರ್ಗೆ ಅನ್ಸಿದ್ರೆ ಆಗಷ್ಟೇ ಆಡಿಟರ್ ಇಂಟರ್ನಲ್ ಕಂಟ್ರೋಲ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಡಿಪೆಂಡ್ ಆಗಬೇಕು. If the auditor has reasons to believe that the client has set up a strong system of internal control, the reliance on that system will help the auditor to reduce the detailed checking which would otherwise be undertaken. So ಆಡಿಟರ್ಗೆ ಅನ್ಸಿದ್ರೆ ಈ ಒಂದು ಕಂಪನಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇಂಟರ್ನಲ್ ಕಂಟ್ರೋಲ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ತುಂಬಾ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿದೆ, ತುಂಬಾ ಸ್ಟ್ರಾಂಗ್ ಆಗಿ ಮೇಂಟೈನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂದಾಗ, ಆಗ ಆಡಿಟರ್ ತುಂಬಾ ಡೀಟೇಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಚೆಕ್ ಮಾಡೋ ನೆಸೆಸಿಟಿ ಇರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಆಲ್ರೆಡಿ ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ಇಂಟರ್ನಲ್ ಕಂಟ್ರೋಲ್ ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಸ್ಕ್ರೂಟಿನಿ ಆಗೋಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಆಡಿಟರ್ಗೆ ಅನ್ಸಿದ್ರೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಸ್ಟ್ರಾಂಗ್ ಆಗಿ ಇಂಟರ್ನಲ್ ಕಂಟ್ರೋಲ್ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಈ ಒಂದು ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅಂತ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಆಗ ಡೀಟೇಲ್ ಚೆಕಿಂಗ್ ಅನ್ನ ಕಮ್ಮಿ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು ಆಡಿಟರ್. So this was the duties of the auditor regarding the internal control. From my next video, I'll start with one more broad topic, that is internal check.